Hi all. As you know, we do quite a lot of videos with different things. Usually Jeff and myself. Sometimes just me doing a talking head thing. Today I'm going to do a wee talking head thing about a Barbarossa game, which is the thick end of £500. We live in the UK, so we've got to show you why. It's about 400 odd pounds if you're overseas. It includes free shipping anywhere in the world. And so far we've not had to put our prices up, which is good news. Now we've two lids on it. One's an Axis box, which we won't show you, and one's a Soviet box, which you're about to see. Now the games do come in our box game and one of these big heavy double wall outers to stop it getting damaged. These are part of the price of the game, and if you've got doubts about storing your boxes, especially if you've taken everything out of it, please don't be daft. Keep that, put the game back in it. It can't really be crushed in normal use. So once you get it out, push it from the bottom, by the way, you'll see your box like this. And as you can see, it's quite a nice, attractive box. Got a German trooper overlaid with the Soviet flag. Key thing about it basically is it talks about both sides of the primary sides of the Eastern Front campaign during the Second World War. Barbarossa is possibly our largest game. It's got in the region of 8,000 plane counters and it's actually 7,840. They cover all the forces that were engaged from 1941, at the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, all the way through to just before the Battle of Kursk. So when you open the box, you'll notice it's very much overstuffed. That's fairly normal. So the first thing you're going to get is some flyers. So this is about our 6 Degrees card game, which you can pick up on Amazon or directly from ourselves. You've got some mention of Vengeance, which is going to be the second half of the Eastern Front, and Liberation, which starts in 1943 with the invasion of Sicily, and we'll have some what-ifs to deal with various Allied plans that didn't come to fruition, including a very large linking scenario that ties Barbarossa, Mare Nostrum, and Vengeance, as well as Liberation all together. This little flyer here basically talks about some of the stuff that we do. And here we go, talking about the next, or two of the games we're going to be doing in the Pacific, which will almost complete the Pacific campaign. So the first one's Kamikaze, and that's the USS Essex getting hit by said Kamikaze. The other one's I Shall Return. And if you take a look at our website, it's probably a bit clearer there, tkc-games.com. You'll see that that's actually General MacArthur wearing ashore at Leyte Gulf. Anyway, back to Barbarossa. So the rules. You get a rules booklet like this. It's perfect bound, as you can see, so no staples in this particular one. There's quite a lot in it. We've got a glossary of terms, but the key thing to remember with this is pretty much anything after the administration section, all of that, if you like, is a straitjacket. It kind of tells you what the goals are and what the aims are. You don't really need that. You don't even need all of this to learn how to play the game. And as you saw when I did some stuff with Jeff, it's pretty easy to actually get through this and learn it. My advice would be to go into that start booklet, which is further on down through the pile of paperwork that we give you with the game, and do the learning scenarios before you try playing any of the bigger modules and the grand campaign. Simply put, it teaches you the mechanics in a fairly simple and easy way. The Axis Order of Battle is, in our view, possibly the best one ever published for the whole of the Eastern Front. It includes all the minor powers, which are in a separate booklet. This is just the Germans. So you have everything from the 1st Tiger Battalions to the Airborne Division. They never did anything much except for fight as infantry, all the assault gun units and so on and so forth. You've got the Luftwaffe and you've got the German Navy as well, for what that's worth inside of that. And the way we've done the counters is that when you start setting up, you'll find each unit in turn based upon this order of battle. So all the ground stuff's there first, and I'll show you that when I show you the counter sheets. The Axis Minor Nations Order of Battle, which you can see here, is what they call stitch bound. So this one is actually a staple booklet. This includes the Romanians, the Italians, the Hungarians, and the Slovaks. And yes, we did remember the Slovaks this time. And they set out in much the same way. The Soviet Order of Battle is a slightly smaller booklet, or so it seems, but there's a huge amount of information in it, and this is based directly upon Stavka files that you can source. We also have a contact inside Russia, who gives quite a bit of help with the Air Force. And his work will also be applied to Vengeance when that comes out. Now, the Western Allied order of battle may sound a bit odd, but it's actually there for very good reason. The Royal Navy's convoys up to Murmansk for the initial period of the war were actually really the only way to supply Russia until the US and the Russians got organised in the Pacific and through Iran. That details what went on all the convoys up to the end of June 1943. You don't really need to use it, but if you do decide to use it and the Germans don't do as well as they did historically, the Soviet player will get a bit more in the way of assets, and obviously vice versa. My thoughts on it are it gives you the biggest navy in the game, which is the Royal Navy, and it can do a bit more than you might think. We have start booklets. Now this has, right at the beginning, excuse me, learning scenarios, which teach you how to, for example, do some ground combat, some air-to-air combat, so you don't even need maps for some of these. All you need is the counters, the charts, and the rules. We tell you what you need, and that walks you through it. Then we go into what we call discovery scenarios. Many of these were written in association with David Hughes, and the idea behind them is they're smaller, much more manageable things, can be played maybe in a single or two map segments. And so it builds up all the way to something like Fall Blau, which is essentially a 1942 start for the campaign. This little booklet here shows all the various assets that the Axis powers get in terms of replacements during the game, whether it's ground forces, air units, or whatever. Now, the Soviet production is actually integrated into the game system, and it's based around factories, which you obviously can move, as they did historically. Within the charts, there's quite a few charts, as you can imagine, it being a very large game. We have a map layout. Now, if you lay out all the primary maps like so, it's roughly 12 foot square, but you only really need those four there to get going. It's nice to have the Crimea on map, so it's a much smaller game. You can actually, as many of my clients and colleagues do, play this on a 6x4 typical gaming table. We'll show you some maps later on through the presentation, but hopefully that gives you an idea that you do not need to have an aircraft hangar to play this game. The unit identification table goes on to indicate other things, the nationalities involved, all the different icons, what they mean, and there's some artwork there, just where my finger is, that tells you what all the various numbers on the plane counters actually means. We have included some strategic mapping. Again, we'll show you that a bit later on, which is zoomed out. It uses the naval sea zones that the game uses for naval purposes as its primary scale. That's really to enable you to play the whole of the convoy war if necessary, if you so desire. The map chart here tells you what all the different train types are, but please bear in mind you can overlay woods onto hills, etc. So that may cause something a wee bit different. That's laid out in the primary game charts, which are here. Okay, I'm not going to bore you too much with them, but they are printed full colour, as you can see. And the idea basically is to make them fairly easy to use whilst imitating to some extent the traditional print techniques that were used by various powers during the Second World War. We provide you with a list of hexes, by the way, for Fall Blau, where you can set up. And this map here shows the primary rail routes that the Germans re-gauged to standard gauge from broad gauge during the war. Effectively, it's about all you really need to set the game up in 1942. And as you can see, for stuff maybe around Stalingrad or wherever, you may experiment yourself. You have an idea of where the rail net should in fact go. That's the orange lines, which are maybe a little bit faint there. The joys of using grey, because grey tends to have a multitude of different colours from the print process. All of these charts that we provide you with are lithographed the same as plane counters, which I think you'll agree are quite impressive. Now, this game has 28 plane counter sheets. Each sheet has 280 counters. So this is sheet number 64. Now, you may recall when I was talking about the Axis order of battle, what it does is it starts with the army HQs and so on. But in actual fact, when you're setting up your units, they all start and just go down each column as you go through it. Now, I've got to be honest, proofing this game was a very large task. There will be the odd counter moved about, and if you look on the back, some of them will have conversions, preferably printed on the back of the unit from which it was converted. So here is the Panzer Corps, and in the front of it is a motorised corps. That just reflects German designation changes during the war. There was actually no real difference to the unit itself. Where you have the different colorations, obviously the black on the grey is the German army itself. The white numbering under the black on grey are OKW forces, so that's a Brandenburg Commando unit. White and black, the Waffen-SS, SS Polizei or Polizei, the Ordnungspolice are the red, and the bright red under the white on the black is actually a Kriegsmarine Port Construction unit. That's quite important because as you go through the game, you'll understand that the logistics system, which enables you to supply things and to control the span of command that your forces have, is, particularly for the German player, a bit challenging. And having a port unit can enable emplacement of various things or the movement of supplies a bit cheaper than you might otherwise expect. So as you go through setting up the game, you'll find that the first 2 or 3 counter sheets worth of German units need to go out straight away. You can see things like the SS Reichsdivision down here, and the various panzer formations, etc., laid out in this as well. So for those of you who want to fight Barbarossa as the aggressor, these are the units you'll be using. As we get into the game and you play through it, you'll find that the replacement rates for the Axis player are fairly low. That's historically normal. It's accurate. So most divisions come with 2 values. Now, I'm hoping you'll be able to see here a unit which the same designation is a 12, a 10 and a 15. So the 12 is where you start. A 10 is a reduced strength rating based upon the fact that the Germans actually reduced their TOE, and the very few units that could be fully rebuilt were always rebuilt to 15 in 1942, so you get more anti-tank weapons with a better quality. They also got more heavy weapons, which is why it bumps up. You'll see as you go through it as well, some of the divisional counters that we have, and I'll see if I can find one right now for you. Here we go. That's the 6th Panzer Division there. Essentially, it lost its armour, was a motorised unit for a period of time. So we show all of that kind of stuff in the game. We correctly reflect the loss of mobility that the Germans suffered over the course of the campaign. On this counter sheet here, you can see white on the grey. These are foreign and special contingent forces. So you'll have read about Eastern troops. That's exactly what these are. This is the Feldherrnhalle Regiment, which later became a division. Where you've got red and the blue, that's a Croatian unit. There's a Spanish unit there with yellow and black. So we are showing all the smaller units that you'd expect to find in the OB. The Kriegsmarine forces here are those German assets that we know to have been deployed in the Black Sea, very few, and in the Baltic. The Baltic force was actually quite strong to begin with, but as requirements elsewhere drove the force structure, it actually winds down. And to be honest with you, it's really a war of light naval forces in the Baltic for an extended period of time until vengeance comes into play. These rather odd Luftwaffe units here, which are actually ships, are seaplane tenders. And because the Luftwaffe was the sole controller effectively of German air power, if you wanted to fly a seaplane, say from Norway or whatever, you needed one of these tenders. We show that. The landing craft, again, are the Luftwaffe Seebel-Freris. Now, you can read into this what you will, but you actually have Wehrmacht landing craft as well, which doesn't, as a Brit or an American, sit very well, because frankly, that's really a Navy task. However, that's where they did it. The Luftwaffe, this pale blue here, this shows all the units in blocks of around 40 planes. Reconnaissance aircraft are actually done a little bit smaller scale. The bright yellow unit is the nationalist Spanish fighter group that went east, and there's Slovenian or Slovakian, etc. air units as well. The upgrades that you see as the game progresses are all done on the same ratings base, so the game is consistent right across the board. Luftwaffe ground forces include the usual anti-aircraft assets, the odd Luftwaffe infantry division, and We also provide some stacking replacement counters, which, to be honest with you, given the scope of the game, is probably not a bad thing. Up here you can see some Soviet ones and some German army ones, etc. And these are actually Bulgarian units. We didn't include many in the game because they didn't overtly fight, but their air force was engaged by the Soviets, and their navy did in fact escort some convoys into the Black Sea. The navy blue on white, for those of you who've got Hakkapali, you'll recognise it. That's the Finnish forces, and this is the units for the continuation war. So between Hakkapali and Barbarossa, we've now published the Finns from 1939 right the way through to the middle of 1943. We have the data to take that to the end of the war. You'll see they have their navy, all their coast defences, their air units, etc. The white and the green here are the Hungarian forces, which were engaged in the campaign against the Soviet Union. This is somewhat different to what you'll see in some competing titles, from what I understand, because we were very lucky. We got access to some scripts and we got hold of some quite rare books, which are really hard to find, and we're able to come up with a very different order of battle that properly reflects the designations, etc., of the various units involved. So more Hungarian stuff. We've included some what-if upgrades, and we've included the normal upgrades that happened historically for pretty much all the powers in the game. The Italian forces here, this is what was there historically as the CSIR, the Italian Corps in Russia, and then armour, which became the 8th Italian Army. Down here you'll notice there's some very interesting looking counters here. I'm not sure, but hoping you can see them. The light's not reflecting too badly. That's what Giovanni Messi, the commander, wanted the units to look like. He did not wish to have a whole army. He just wanted his 2 or 3 divisions to be heavily upgraded to give him essentially a fully mechanized corps. We have some indication of what might have been included, so that's what we've done here, and it gives you an option as a player. The gold on the dark blue here are the Romanian forces. And you can see there's a unit that we plugged in when I had clearly missed it when I was getting proofed. Again, they include all the ground, naval and air units that the Romanians engaged during the war. And you'll also see upgrades and potential what-if counters here as the counter mix progresses. The Slovaks are here. That's the white and the dark blue. They made as big a contribution as a small nation could do, and lost heart as most of the Axis allies did. This dark blue is the Royal Navy. It is, as you can see, generally the largest navy in the game. There's actually 2 full counter sheets, pretty much Royal Navy ships, as you can see here. The ones with red at the bottom are US Navy assets. The yellow and the dark blue are Royal Australian Navy ships. And this, I don't know again if you can see it clearly, but that is actually a mixed British and Soviet merchant counter, a naval shipping pound. So these ships and a few RAF aircraft are what we need to show. The Norwegian and American air units are actually in Iceland, and they did provide air cover for the convoys at certain points. They also include various little commando assets that were used for various things up around Svalbard off the Norwegian coast. The red on the dark blue here continues the line of thought of the Royal Navy. That's Royal Canadian Navy, so you can see the odd thing here. There's more US ships and shipping points and so on. And again, the dark brown with the red here indicates the Soviet/American mixed naval shipping point. So we've got some free Polish ships. I think you can see we've gone to a great deal of length to make sure you get what you need. We also broke up the V&W class and Hunt class destroyer flotillas from various prior games, because they actually do rate as individual ships and should be shown as such. They certainly are far too strong all too often to show as a flotilla, and to me it's absolutely ridiculous that you can have 3 destroyers rating the same as a cruiser and not suffering penalties for that in the game. This next counter sheet pretty much brings the Axis forces to completion. Again, this bit here is really stuff that we did, I used to proof. So you got some German assets, a few Finnish assets, and these are positional Luftwaffe A guns and so on and so forth. Over here, though, we start to get into the Red Army. Now, the Red Army relies upon production. And as you can see, we've got oil wells, we've got oil refineries, and we've got various different types of munitions plants. And it's those things there that generate the forces that the Red Army requires to continue the war. These can be upgraded. And if you look on the back, you'll see back printed or upgrades for these units or downgrades, depending on the way you want to look at it and the situation. These are some generic counters for fortifications. They use standard NATO symbology to indicate it, but they are not oriented. So we assume that fortifies the hex. To be fair, if you wanted to play this in a slightly more realistic fashion, you could actually use these as an orientation. So you could end up with maybe 4 counters, would you believe, obviously for each of for various vertices of the hex. The white here with a brown text on it is the Soviet Navy, and these are Red Air Force aircraft here, and that says into the Red Army. Now, the Red Army is the largest army in the game by some margin, an awful lot of units in it. Based upon the Stafford files and a lot of reading and a lot of help from people all over the world, we've managed to put together what we believe is a relatively comprehensive OB. If I was a bit concerned about anything, it might be a slight shortage of some of the border guards, but actually they're not important. They tended to be rolled into the local Red Army units or the local NKVD units as necessary. So we have some NKVD assets here, more Navy, and lots of Army, mostly Army and Corps HQs up here. Lots of static anti-aircraft guns. The yellow on the red, or the gold in the red, are Soviet guards. As you go through the OB, you'll see we do mention Soviet ethnic units. These are the units with the white icon here. Stalin did not trust many ethnicities, particularly those of Muslim faith, during the Second World War. Units which had ethnic, as he saw it, problems were treated differently, and the game handles that. This is actually where an awful lot of the German army's Eastern troops came from. People were disaffected by the Soviet regime and were recruited by the Germans from POWs or whatever. Equally, some of the hardest fighting units in the Red Army should be in that ethnic colour, and they are in the game. We do comment on that through the OB. So, moving forward, you see assorted NKVD units, assorted guards units and militia units here. These are all detailed fully. Where we've got guards rocket artillery, and that's every rocket artillery unit in the Red Army was called guards rocket artillery. We show them in this partial guards colour. They didn't get anything special. It was just to try and emphasise to the local commanders that these were high value units with a lot of firepower. So as you continue going through it, you'll start to see the change away from large, very powerful divisions. A Red Army Rifle Division in 1941, prior to the changes in order of battle and content to the units, were actually more powerful than pretty much any other infantry division, assuming they could be used. It turned out that the Soviets couldn't use them effectively, so they scaled everything down, and you end up with much weaker divisions, which rate somewhere between a 6 and a 12. Those upgrades are included in the game system, so you can actually see how that progresses over time. You can also see, again, as we get further on, you'll start to see the original armour divisions disappearing. And then they will convert to tank corps. I'm trying to move forward a little bit here, a bit quicker, because we've got a lot of the brigades. Now, we show the armoured brigades not as a brigade, but as a regimental grouping, because in terms of the total number of tanks and manpower in them, they're really reinforced regiments. They're not full brigades. Because the game system uses regimental equivalent size stacking points, we actually have a consistent stacking system right across the board. So we don't have this odd situation where one or two of our competitors have a brigade counter which is bigger than another brigade counter which is actually the same size as a regiment. You have to look at the content and get it right. So these units here are tank corps. Now, a tank corps is really 3 small brigades rammed together with a little bit more supporting stuff in it. It's a division. So don't be fooled by nomenclature. We will call it 1 TC or 2 TC or 3 GTC. So that would be the 1st, 2nd or 3rd Tank Corps or the 4th Guards Tank Corps. As you go on, you'll find the rocket artillery gets progressively stronger. And we've actually massively downgraded this because the rate of fire of it is quite low. And there are various rules that handle the application of it. You can see that the Guards armoured and tank core assets get progressively much stronger over time. And there is a rule that handles a Soviet mechanised division or mechanised corps, because they actually are really an armoured division with more bells and whistles. They're a bit more infantry, but they are not the way the Germans had Panzer Grenadier divisions with virtually no armour in them. The Red Air Force is not small. It's lacking in quality, but there's an awful lot of it, as you can see, because we're still looking at Red Air Force planes. And they run out here. And then we have Guards air units, some beginning here and here, more naval air units, and these rather intriguing things here, which are the NATO designator for an unknown asset, are in fact partisans. As you know, the Soviet Union fought quite an aggressive partisan war against the invader. The Soviet Navy is detailed heavily here. A lot of this was taken from Russian sources. As far as we can tell, is about as good as you're going to get in the West. Some of the ships were very good, some were really not good at all. And if you take a look, we have the odd really massive, highly modernised ship. What they actually are projects that were never taken to fruition. Some of these ships have been laid down, some were not. So we give you the what if naval stuff and some methods to utilise them if you so desire. Finally, we've got some generics. I would highly recommend our generic counter sheet, which adds weather mapping information or assistance. It adds more of the general generic counters, whether it's more fortifications, air bases, hit markers of different types, bridge breaks, logistic points, general supply points, whether or not anti-aircraft units, heavy ones, are being used as anti-tank or AA. So there's an awful lot of stuff here. We've got pack designated and who did it by. I would strongly recommend the generic counter sheet, because you're probably going to want more generics than you get in the box, but there isn't enough room in the box to put more in, so I'm a bit sorry about that in one regard, but I'd much rather give you the forces that fought it and have you buy, or later on maybe receive as part of a bundle, a generic counter sheet, because I think it's more exciting for you as the player to get the things that you really want. Maps. So this is an example of our sea zone mapping, and you see Iceland over here. This is Shetland here. So the convoys would operate all the way around here to Murmansk in this area here, or down to Archangel down here. So that gives you an idea of the strategic mapping. Now, size-wise, I have a 2-foot rule here. It's 600mm long, so it's approximately 2 feet. So I'm hoping you can see this is just under 2 feet long. And it's, I don't know, 7 inches deep. There's a second smaller sea zone map that sits here. It's got the British Isles on it. Next map segment I'm going to show you. I'm not going to show you them all, just so you know, because they all look much the same. This here is the Moscow area. Moscow is down at the bottom, and Leningrad is just off the map that way. So that gives you an idea just how much much we put in terms of detail. All the cities are based upon actual populations from 1936 through to about 40, depending when the censuses were done. Its northern extent, as you saw from the sea zone mapping, is up at the North Cape, and it goes all the way south to beneath the Caspian Sea, which you have here. Okay. In the west, you'll find that Warsaw is on map. I cannot recall. I think it is. Berlin's probably on map as well. Certainly Bucharest is, and Ploiești. And it goes all the way east to beyond the Ural Mountains. So this is Central Asia with the Aral Sea here. Now, a few people have commented on the Aral Sea. That is based upon fairly modern mapping of the period. The extent of it was actually quite variable. I appreciate that after Soviet damage to the environment there, it's much smaller now. It did actually swell and contract. It wasn't really a very useful seaway. It was very shallow. So it's hard to say whether or not it should be another half hex out of the way or maybe half hex in the way. But I understand from a lot of reading that the RLC was actually coming out of quite severe drought in 1941 and expanded during the war. So there's a good chance that some of this towards the end of the war might need to be a little bit more blue, but I don't see any point in that because, frankly, if you're the German player and you get there, your Soviet opponents should probably stop playing games. So the Euro mapping, you don't really need it, but it's a nice to have. You do definitely need all the stuff west of that. Now this bit here is really important if you're the German player because the Germans are constantly complaining about oil. This is Baku, it's where the biggest oil wells in Europe and the Near East happened to be. And the Germans kind of got to about this area here and that was it. So the bottom line is you have the opportunity in this game to do everything that the powers themselves did during the time frame. Finally, within the box, you'll get 2 D10 dice. If you've got a lot of dice at home and you don't want the dice, let me know and I won't put them in the box. To be honest with you, we like to give a complete game. So that, effectively, is our Barbarossa product. If you're interested, there will be a link in the description below. Take a wee look at our website. We do have Facebook. Just look for TSWW Games on Facebook. We have the TSWW Gaming Community on Facebook. And if you want to join and have a chat with people who play these games, please feel free. So take a look on our website. There might be a sale. There might be a bundle where you can get a deal. If you've got any questions, email us through info@ on the website. And I hope to see you again soon where we unbox some other games for you. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day and you'd all take care. Bye bye.